Hey, this is Melisha and welcome to this month's Flipped Coding webinar. Today we'll be going over the MERN stack. So that's MongoDB, Express.js, React.js, and Node.js. So we'll be building a really small application just to give you guys an idea of how you would actually make a real MERN stack application. And since this is live, you can ask me questions in the comments and I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. At the end of every webinar I do, I like to give the people who stick around an opportunity to get into my class for a discounted rate. It's just my way of saying, hey, it looks like you're really trying to do this. You stuck around until the end, so here's a little, I guess, extra bonus since you went through the effort of trying to follow along. So what we'll do, we'll go through a little bit of background about the stack itself, then we'll go through some project setup, and we'll jump into the code, and then we'll get everything connected and running and wrap up at the end. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the background. Let me get that pulled up here. Okay, so this is the stack that you'll be learning today. Like I said, it's MongoDB, Express, React, Node. Oh, you can't see that. Okay, here we go. So, like I said earlier, this is the stack that you'll be learning today. Will only take about an hour, but you'll learn how to set up a new database in MongoDB. You'll learn how to send data to your new database from Express and Node. And then you'll learn how to connect all of it together, and you'll see how you get the information from a user on the React front end, how it gets processed in the Node Express backend, and then finally how it gets added to the database. So in case you were wondering who actually uses the MERN stack on a production product, you can look at my favorite place, NASA. They actually use Mongo, Node.js, and React for their website. You probably already know about eBay. You know how huge they are, and they use this tech stack. PayPal, Walmart, Trello, a lot of large companies use the MERN stack. And at the very least, you'll be able to take different parts from the stack and apply them to different jobs. So that actually leads perfectly into this. Every piece of the MERN stack is valuable on its own. So once you know how to work with a MongoDB database, throw it on your resume. Once you know how to work with Node and Express, boom, you know how to do backend JS development. And then, of course, React, you can be just a React developer without doing any of the other stuff. But every piece of this stack adds some value to you as a web developer. And, of course, you'll know how to put everything together. So it's important for developers to kind of have at least a brief understanding of how the whole application works. So by learning the MERN stack, you'll know everything from the front end to the database, and you might get into deployments and continuous integration and stuff like that. And of course, since most people are learning the MERN stack to get a job, well, a lot of jobs use this stack or something really similar to it. Before we get started with our project setup, I want to make sure you have all of the things you need to follow along. I'll be using the Visual Studio Code IDE. Is just what I like to use. If you like Atom or Sublime, whatever you want to write in, you can. But if you want to follow along exactly with me, I'm using Visual Studio Code. Then you need to download the MongoDB server. So this is the link for it, but make sure you are getting the server, not just Compass. Compass will be installed when you install the full server. So follow that link, download MongoDB, install it, all that good stuff. And then Node.js, well, you definitely need to have Node on your computer if you want to do anything using like NPM or React or Angular or really any front-end JavaScript framework and a lot of back-end JavaScript frameworks. So with that being said, let's go ahead and open Visual Studio Code. So this is completely blank. We're starting fresh. And we'll go over here. If you don't see this sidebar or whatever, just click on the file. It'll pull it up. And we're going to open a folder. I'm going to go in here. And this is where we'll make the directory for our project. So I'm going to make a new folder, and I'm going to call it Rocket App. Rocket_app. And that's the folder that we'll be working in. So, since we're doing all of this stuff with Mongo and Express, React, blah, 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 you probably think it's really complicated to get this set up. Well, it is not. So, go ahead and open your terminal, and you'll see we're in our directory for the Rocket app. And what we'll do here is run this command called mpx create-react demo, and we'll go ahead and call it Rocket App. One thing I usually forget is when you call this kind of bootstrapping way to start a React app, it makes a folder for you. So you're going to have the Rocket App directory inside of Rocket App. But go ahead and run the mpx. Oh, got a little bit of an error. Well, welcome to live coding. So you'll get to see what happens on just a regular basis. I'm not exactly sure why that didn't work. Let's just try running it again to get a better look at that error. Okay, let's try to do an npm install create react demo. Oh, and if you can hear that in the background, that's just, I'm in Oklahoma, so they have a tornado siren sometimes to make sure they work. But let's try that npx command again. All right. So we just needed to install this package. I hope you saw what happened. What we did, we were getting an error at first, and of course we don't like those. So I hadn't installed this create react demo yet. So what we did, we just ran an npm install create react demo, and then it installed it. You see our node modules over here. And then you see down here, we just ran that npx command again. And if you look over in your sidebar, you'll see this new Rocket app folder. So let's go through this real quick. In the sources, you'll find your components. These are your React components. And right here, this crazy looking file is for your server side stuff. So this is where we'll be putting all of our node functionality. And as you can see, it generated a lot of stuff for us just off the bat. So if you go back down to the terminal, let me make this a little bigger. And I'll go ahead and clear that. So we need to make sure that we're in this particular Rocket app directory. So we'll need to do cd, and we'll do rocket_app. Oh, rocket, not rocker. Okay, so now I'm in this directory. And what we'll do from here is run npm start. And, oh, okay, well, you guys get to see real programming. So what error did it give us? We typed in npm. One thing you always have to do that, I don't know, sometimes live programming you forget things, but one thing you always have to do when you create an app using the create react demo, you need to run npm install, or I personally like Yarn better, but you have to install all of the packages. If you look inside of our Rocket app folder, you notice there aren't any there's not a node modules folder. That means we don't have anything that we need installed for this app to work. So it's gonna go ahead and fetch all of those things, load them in, and after this, which will probably take a few minutes or a couple minutes, we should be good to go. So you see it made our node modules folder up here, and now we just wait. But while we're waiting, let me take you through these folders a little bit. So usually when you have a React node type application, you'll use Babel, Webpack to kind of mush them together and make them work. And what happens is you have all of your source files, so all of your components, and you'll want those to load. So let me pretty this up. All right. And what you'll see in here is that this start script, this is when you run npm start, this is what gets run. So it goes to the bin folder and gets this ww file, and it runs your back end, it loads in your front end, it does everything at the same time. That's exactly what we want. And that's what's so great about Webpack and Babel. So one thing I will suggest that you add to this start, since we're just practicing, is to do -- inspect. And what that does, it runs Node in debug mode, which means you can go to the browser and use the developer tools, really similar to how you do on the front end. Okay, so now all of our packages are installed. We should be able to just run npm start. And yay, we started our app. So let's go ahead, pull that up. It should be on localhost 3000. Let me check that. Yes, it is on localhost 3000. So this is our little app right now. And as you can see, we have a home page. It already has some built-in routing. It's pretty great. So from here, what we'll be doing is adding our own code to it to demonstrate how you work across the MERN stack. And to do that, we will start on the front end. We'll go ahead and get our React app ready. Okay, so go ahead and click on the home.js file. Double click it so it'll stay open. And we're going to start by just putting a few things in here. So first thing, well, sorry guys, I hate it when my spaces are off. All right, there we go. So maybe not the home, I think. No, home is fine. So we'll go ahead and get rid of some spaces. It already has so much set up for us that it's pretty great. So let's talk about React a little bit. If you weren't able to make it to last month's webinar where I covered React exclusively, you can always sign up for the class and watch it later. But for now, we'll cover a few React basics. So there's one thing I do want to change just because this is the way that I always code. And that's just how we export this. I usually don't like to do that up here just because it makes it a little bit cleaner to read to me. And let's make sure. Okay, didn't break anything. Still working. Good. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we are going to set up a state and some functions, and we'll add a little bit to our render method here. So the first thing we're going to do is set up a state for this. So basically what we want to do is get a user ID, an email address, and a password. So the user will enter their email address and their password on the form we're about to make, and we'll just assign them a user ID. So let's go ahead and set up our state. So it's going to be this dot state equals this object, and we're going to say one of our values is going to be a user ID. We'll default it to 0. Then we'll have a user email. We'll set it as an empty string. Then we'll have the password, which we'll also set as an empty string. And we're going to do one more thing where we're going to say, hey, there's a chance we'll get a message from the server when we start, handling data from the database. So what we'll do here is make this just message from server, and we'll default it to an empty string. And you'll see what we're going to use this for pretty soon. So this is it for the constructor right now. Now let's go ahead and add a few things to our render method. So the first thing we're going to do is if we get a message back from the server, that means there was some kind of error. And, well, didn't do that quite right. So we'll do that by getting this dot state dot, what is it? Message from server. Okay. So if this is equal to an empty string, that's good. Means we didn't get any errors. And we'll go ahead and wrap the return statement in this. And just so we have another path, if it doesn't return a message, we'll just say, go ahead and render, sorry about that. I'm getting myself a little confused. So we'll go ahead and say return, and we'll just say user added inside of this div. So user added. Okay. So now if there's no message from the server, we should still see our same home page. Okay, that is step 1. Now what we're gonna do is add in just a couple of things. We're gonna add in a label and an input just so we can get our, let's say we'll get our username first, or our email address first. So what we'll do is inside of here, right above this link to the about page, we're just gonna put another div, okay? And inside of this div, we're gonna put a label for our user email input. So one thing with React, you don't get to use the for attribute, is HTML4, just so you're aware of that. So we'll go ahead and give this a for value of user email, and we'll just put email and a colon inside of here. Then we will get our input and go ahead and make that closing tag, enter it down, and well, maybe not yet. So what we'll do here, we know this should have a type of text because they're going to be typing in an email address. And just to clarify, for best practices or validation, you might change this type to email, but since we're just going through a really quick and dirty demo of how to put together a whole MERN-stack application, some of the best practices are probably not going to be there. So keep that in mind while we're going through this. Then on the next line, we'll give it an ID of user underscore email. On the next line, we'll give it a name of same thing, user underscore email. Then this is where it gets fun. We'll give it a value, and it's going to bind to our user email in the state. Okay? Then the last thing we'll do with this input, I know this is a lot, we're gonna call an onChange method. So whenever somebody types into this box, it's gonna trigger this function that we haven't made yet. So it'll be this dot handle text change. Okay, so we're not gonna make this function quite yet. We're gonna go ahead and finish out this little form that we're making. And good news, there's only one more input. So if you wanna go ahead and copy this label and input we just made and paste it right below it. Sometimes, you know, Visual Studio Code messes up the format, but you can fix that. And this time, this is where they're going to enter their password. So we'll just change the names a little bit to make it show this is for the password. It's still going to be a type text input. And this time, the ID is going to be user password. The name's going to be user password. Oh, can you guess what's next? User password. Woo! So we'll do that. And it's going to have the same change method. So we'll leave that there. And the last element we'll add for now is just going to be a button. So we'll make our button and we'll give it some text, say add new user. But inside of the opening tag, we're going to make an onClick call. So whenever you click this button, it's going to click this method that we haven't made yet, of course. So it's called this .onClick because we're so creative here. Okay, so we have pretty much we have the HTML ready to go. If you want to take a look at it, that's it. It's nothing fancy, doesn't have to be. So we are going to work on building out these methods now, and then I'm going to show you how exactly we send the user input back to the node side of things before it gets to the database. So first thing we're going to do is make our new functions. So one of them was handle change text, and this is going to take in an event, and we'll just call that E. So usually when you see E throughout code, it's probably related to an event. All right, so this is what's going to happen. If we have entered text into a specific input, so for this one, we're going to say if it's equal to user email, then we will do this. So we'll set our state and we'll update the user email value to be our target value. And let me put that semicolon before I forget it. And we can go ahead and copy and paste this too. And we'll do the same thing for the password. Okay, so change that to password. And do the same thing down here. And now we have handled our changing text. Okay, so now what we'll do is go ahead and make our, what's that other function? We'll go ahead and make our onClick function. So this one is going to be really simple, and it's going to lead us to a completely different function. So we'll do onClick, and it'll take an event. Doesn't really need to, so maybe it won't take an event. And we'll do this dot insert new user, and we'll give it this. So what we did here was make a function that calls another function, and this other function that we're about to make is going to be what passes our data from the front end to the back end. So before we do that, there's a couple of things we need to import up here. And the first one is going to be the Axios library. So do import Axios from blah. So we haven't installed this. I don't know if it came with it pre-installed or whatever, but we'll find out really soon. And the next thing we want to do is another type of import statement, but it's required. So we'll make a variable called query string. And this will just be the query string library. Okay, so we've imported some things, and now we can go ahead and write the code that's going to send the user data to the back end. And we already know what it's called. It's called insert new user. It's going to take an event parameter, which actually, when you look up here, it's actually going to be this. And then inside of here, this is where Axios comes in. So this is how we send requests to the back end. So here we'll use the Axios object, and we'll use the post post method, and we'll give it a name. This right here is what function is looking for in the back end, or what URL string thing it's looking for in the back end. So we're gonna call that, and from here, let's go ahead and space that out. We are going to use our query string to stringify our data. And all we're doing is we're going to send the user ID to the back end. So you can set it to whatever number you want here. I'm just going to call it 1. And in a production app, you would never set the user ID like this. But again, this is just an example so that you have an idea of how all this stuff works together. So we'll also send the user email back, and it's gonna come from our event state user email. And we will do the exact same thing for the password. So copy paste that, update this text. And this is the data that's going to get sent to the back end. So you've basically made a JSON object thing to send to the back end. It's a string. That's it. You made a string out of a JSON object. Done. So now we'll go ahead and set our headers. So that's an object on its own, and it has headers in it. And you can give it multiple headers if you want, but most of the time, just the content type. If I can type, then we'll do this. So application. Okay. So that's what we're passing into the header. And then down here, what we'll have to do is, let's close that bracket. So we are done with our post method. We've sent everything in. We sent which which route we're calling. We've sent the data. We've sent the headers. So now what we're looking for is what happens after this. So you can do a .then. And we'll just make a function, and it gets the response that comes back from the node server side. So this response is what we'll get back after we pass this to our Node.js side. And we'll just set, if we get anything back, this is the key. We are sending data to the database. So in most cases, you don't expect anything back. But if we do have a response, that means there was probably an error. And that's where that message from server comes in. So we'll go ahead and set our state to whatever is in this response. So hopefully we don't ever hit this, because that would mean we have an error somewhere. And let's see, why is it fussing down here? Ooh, there we go. Okay, so we have everything we need to start sending data to our backend. Okay, now you see down here, we have this error. That means we need to do an npm or yarn add to add this package. So go ahead and stop it from running. And we'll clear out the terminal. And what we'll do, let's see where the node modules folder is. You see it is inside of this Rocket app. We are inside of Rocket app. Perfect. So what we'll do is just yarn add Axios. Let it do its thing, get all the packages, blah, blah, blah. And while it's doing that, there's one thing I want to show you in particular. So, oh, it did that really fast. Let's run it again and see if we have any errors. All right. Okay. Refresh this. All right, we don't have any errors. And if you go to the developer tools, you can just hit F12. And we go to sources, React. You can open this up and see what all is happening inside of this element. I wanted to make sure that you guys saw this before we go too much further. So let's go ahead and type in, I don't know, just some email address. So it's telling me that we have this target name and can't read property of blah. All right, whatever. So we will go back here and see what's happening with that. So we're doing a set state, and for some reason it's not liking that. What was that error? Cannot read property set state of, oh, you know what we didn't do? When you use React, you have to bind these functions to this, or else they won't work. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll do that for all three of the functions we made. So it'll be this handle text change dot bind, and then we bind to this so that it has access to all of the state stuff and everything else that's stored in the this variable, for lack of a better word. And we can go ahead and copy that, paste it 2 times, and change these to our other function names. And last one, insert user. Okay, we'll save that. All right, we didn't get any errors on this side. That's all clear now. So we'll type something in. And all right, no errors so far. That's always good. And let's see what we have in our React tools. So make this a little bit bigger so I can bring that over a little bit. We'll go all the way down into our root, go into home, and boom, you see, we typed in this test, blah, 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 the password, and it set the state automatically. So if we delete that M and go back to our developer tools, you'll see over here, it's gone. So we have it bound to the right things, and we're going in the right direction. So the next thing, we are done with the front end. This is it. This is the whole front end. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments, because I know we're moving pretty fast, not explaining a whole lot here, but hopefully you're getting the understanding of what's happening. So now we'll go into our Node.js backend, which looks a lot crazier than our front end. But don't be intimidated by this. Most of it is just stuff that we won't use. So if you want to learn more about what's happening in this file, you can always sign up for the class and we'll go over this in a lot more detail. Okay, so all we're going to do inside of this app.js file is we're going to establish our connection to the MongoDB database. So we're going the whole potato. You got the front end, which is done. Now we're going to finish up the back end and do a little database stuff. So to start with, we need to make a connection to the database. And to do that, we're going to use the Mongoose library. It's really good for handling database connections in Node. And if you don't have it installed, go ahead and do a yarn add mongoose. And we'll just let that run. And while it's installing that package, we'll go ahead and start setting up some stuff in our app.js file. All right, so it's done down here. So we're going to make a constant, and we're going to call it mongoose, and it's just going to require this particular library. Okay. So now we have what we need to actually connect to the database. And to do that, we will use our Mongoose object, and we'll use the connect method that comes with Mongoose. And now, this is what you've been waiting for. Right in this connect, you will need the connection string to your Mongoose, to your Mongo database. So that means we're going to switch gears and do a little bit of database stuff. So go ahead and open MongoDB Compass. This is what it'll look like when you open it for the first time. And what we're going to do, you can actually leave all of this stuff like it is. I'm going to give this a name though. I'm going to call it, I don't know, local MERN? Sure, you call it whatever you like, but go ahead and click connect, and you will maybe get this error. It's okay, it's really not a big deal. It just means that your MongoDB server isn't running. And to get it to run, if you're on Windows, just come over here and search for the command prompt. So just type cmd and it'll pop this up. And from here, we need to find the bin directory for our MongoDB server. It's a lot easier than it sounds. So we'll just go to File Explorer. You can go to your C drive or whatever and look inside of your program files. At least this is where MongoDB installed for me. So it might be in your program x86. Don't know. So go ahead and go to the MongoDB folder, go inside of the server, go inside of the version, and go inside of the bin. The reason we did all of this is just to get this path. It's a lot easier to get it this way, so you know exactly where you're going to be. And we need to be in that directory in our terminal. So we'll go ahead and cd and paste that in there. And now that we're inside of that bin folder, we'll run mongod. And all this does is start up the server for you. So when you go back and click connect, ta-da, you actually connect it to a database. Well, to a MongoDB server. And what we're going to do here is really simple. We don't have a database for our app yet, so we'll just click on Create Database. And you know what? We called it Rocket App, so that's what our database name is going to be. And for now, all we're doing is getting an email address, a password for a user, so we'll make a user collection. And just for those of you who don't come from a NoSQL background, a collection is really similar to a table. So this is where we'll store all of the information that the users input. So go ahead and create that database. And now if you go over here, you'll see that you have a users collection that's empty. What we're going to do now is go ahead and take the connection string for this database, and kind of the way that you know what you're using is you can go ahead and go back out to I don't know. This is just the way that I usually do it when I'm actually developing. So I'll just disconnect and check out this URL. There's other ways you can do it. I'm sure some of you know better ways, but this is kind of what I'm used to. So we know that localhost is typically 127.0.0.1. Okay, so we have that. So now to this, and there's one more thing we'll put in here. It is for just some parsing. So use new URL, use new URL parser. Yes, thank you, autocomplete. And we'll set that to true. So all that does is it handles the data that is sent back and forth between the database. And don't forget your semicolon. Then down here, we'll do a const connection. And this is how we're actually going to make a live connection to our database. Super simple. Mongoose.connection. It's crazy how much you'll say mongoose and Mongo when you really get into this stack. All right, so now we have a connection object. We will go ahead and use it. So you only want to open the connection to the database once. And that's exactly what this is doing. And when you open, just so you know that it's running, you can call this function and just log a little output to the console. You know, just for you. Because sometimes you don't always know if you have things wired up right, and having a little message here really helps. Okay, semicolon, semicolon. Go ahead and save that. All right, you have officially connected to your first MongoDB database. And if you have any questions so far, don't forget I'm here to answer them. Just put them in the comments and I'll do my best to give you a good answer. All right, so that's actually going to be it for us in our back end for this part. So if you'll notice up here, we have a routes variable. This is where the magic really happens. So we're going to go into this routes folder here and go to the index.js file. The beauty about this is that we don't actually need this particular router, but since it's here, we can reuse a lot of the syntax. So we're going to get rid of this crazy looking regex and just make it a slash. What this does, it basically gets the root of your website, and this is where it sends it every time. Okay, so we can go ahead and get rid of that. And we're gonna clean this out pretty good too. All we want to return is just the index. So that index is right in here somewhere. Yes. We're gonna go ahead and save that. But no, really, it's just this. That's all that index is. That's what's gonna get rendered when you go to your home page, basically. You'll get this nice JS file here. Okay, back on task. So now we have just our base root. What we're going to do is add a root for when you insert a new user or when they submit their information. And to do that, we're going to use our router, and we're going to do root, and we'll give it the root that it's looking for. So if you remember back here, we used this string for our post method? Well, we need to pass that string in here to get the right root. So if we didn't use insert, it would probably call this. That's not what we want to do. So we have our root, and now we're gonna use the post method and just make a function inside of here. We'll get our request and response. Go ahead and throw some curly braces in there. I like to drop out and put that semicolon. Oh, they messed up my spaces. Let's fix that and save it. Okay, so now inside of this post callback, what we're gonna do is make a new user object, and it's gonna have the values that come in from the request body. Come on, capital U. That's something we need to do. So whenever you're handling data, like you're actually making the call to the database, you'll have a model. And where this model comes from, we get to make a new folder. Yay! So let's go just straight to the Rocket app folder and right click it, make a new folder, and we'll call this models. And inside of this models folder, we are going to make a user model.js. And basically and write it to the database in this format. That's exactly what we're gonna do. So we'll go ahead and bring in our Mongoose. Require Mongoose, yes. Then we'll call one of the objects inside of Mongoose so that we can use it. So we'll use the schema. And this is basically like a template for how we're going to write the data to the database. So we have our schema, we have our Mongoose. Now all we need to do is make our user. So our user is just going to be an object, a new schema object, and we'll go ahead and fill that out. So we'll send a user ID that we manually change for now, but in pretty much every other case, you would have that being auto-generated somewhere. But we know this is about to be a user ID, so it's going to be a number. Then we'll make our user password, and it's going to have a type of string. And then just to save a little time, we'll copy and paste this. And that'll be for the user email, which is also a string. And put that semicolon there. And the last thing we have to do is export this module so we can use it in our index.js file. So we'll export this Mongoose model, and it's just user. Okay, go ahead and save that. You don't have to leave this open, I'm not. So now we need to import that user model. Still super easy. So we'll just require it. And we'll go up to that folder, to models, and voila, we have our model in place. So what this does is lets us use this object to write the data back to the correct user data. So we're sending the right stuff to the right place. We'll go ahead and semicolon that, and that's exactly what we're doing. Excuse my dog, he's a ham sometimes. Alright, so this right here, we just saved our user. So this is in the database at this point. Now what we want to do is send just a little message back for us so we know that it worked. So we will send our status of 200, and we'll just write this little message here. So user added. Okay, sure. Most of the time you make it a little more professional sounding, but this is for fun. We don't need to be professional. And this is just to catch if there's any errors that come up. So we're not. I don't know if that actually makes it go faster. Wait a second. Is this the right? Oh, okay. That's fine. So what's happening here is, let's go into this bin. So when this gets generated, it comes to this bin folder and it goes to the www file. And basically what it's saying is somewhere we have a variable that's not defined. And what we'll do, let's look at that error message again. So it's saying that this title in the views index EJS file is wrong. Okay, so we will go into our views, look at this. You're right, we don't have this defined anywhere. So we'll just delete it and we'll just call this MERN-stack demo. How about that? Now we'll stop this, clear out the terminal, and go ahead and run start again. Okay, let's start it up. Oh, did you see that? We have connected to the MongoDB database. So if you've been following along with everything I've been doing so far, you should have a connection to your database. So now let's make sure that the front end is working. And voila, the front end works. So let's go ahead and add a user and see if it actually changes anything in the database. Before we click that button though, I want to show you, I want you to go back in the database and see for yourself that your Rocket app user collection is empty. There's nothing in here. 0 documents. So we're gonna add this user. Oh, we got our message. And we're gonna come back here and we're going to refresh this database. Oh, come up here. You see we have 1 document. We did it. It works. It's adding users to the database. We have that ID that we set in right here. That's what number we sent. And just to prove it to you, just type in some funky number, just something like that. Sure, we'll go ahead and save it. And again, I want you to look at this database, refresh it. There is still only 1 document, and it's still just this one. So we're going to go back to our front end. We refresh the page, just so you know, and we'll type in a new email address. And because I'm so creative, I'll just put the number 1 in there. Same here, because why not? Never ever do this for a password, please. Just throwing that out there. So let's go ahead and add a user. We got our message again. Let us go back up here, refresh, and we have 2 documents. Check out the crazy ID. We did it. That's it. You actually got through your first MERN-stack application. I'm pretty excited because you got to see what it's like to do this in real time. Like all of the little errors that kept popping up and me having to go back and redo little stuff, that's what real programming looks like. So if you have that problem where you think you're supposed to get everything perfect the first time, believe me, you're not. It is okay if you have to Google stuff. It's okay if you have to just sit there and stew on a problem for a while. It is just a matter of being able to keep going. You just got to be persistent. But I'm pretty excited that we got this working. Everything's wired up and connected. So if you have any questions for me, feel free to put them in the comments. This project is actually up on GitHub. So if you go to my GitHub page, so you can just type github.com/flippedcoder. That's me. So you go here and you'll be able to find that inside of the little demos, and that's it. The July Webby project, the Rocket app. So ignore this crap. Anyways, we have that done. So if you have any questions for me, feel free to ask me in the comments. I'm kind of awkward just sitting on camera, not saying anything or doing anything. So I will stick around for a while and you can ask me questions. I just won't be talking anymore. And also, check your email in about 5 minutes. Since you actually showed up to the webinar, I'm going to send you an offer that you can't refuse. And plus, it'll give you more details about how you can get into my class for a discounted rate so that you can get more into the MERN-stack details, because we really did just do a quick high level, this is how you throw everything together. So I hope you guys learned something, and like I said, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comments, and don't forget to check your email in 5 minutes. That's when it's going to be there. So thanks for showing up, thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you next time.